Thank you. This basically is sort of a status report on the writ and the response, what I believe is from the White House through Mitnick, who is the general counsel for Department of Homeland Security, who I served personally through one of his attorneys, Sarah, on the 29th of October in the around 2 o'clock, I guess. But as a result of that, I then reworked the U.S. Court of Appeals of the Armed Forces writ, which had been rejected from filing, and submitted it to the Supreme Court again on Friday. And when I was on my way home, I got a call on my other phone, which had run out of battery and it was dead. I got a message on my 718 phone that a Thomas Donahue, a Secret Service agent, wanted to speak with me in regards to the package I had dropped off with General Counsel Mitnick of the Department of Homeland Security. So I called back, and this was about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and I was on the train headed back to New York, and all of the calls, it was a 518. 518 is the Albany area code, and when I called that number, everything, according to the agent on duty, reverts back to New York City, and that they said that I should call on Monday and talk to Agent Donahue. So I did, and Agent Donahue again was not there, but he called me. He called me back on Tuesday, or excuse me, he called me back on Monday, and he said that he wanted to know where I was at the moment, and I said, well, I'm living upstate, and I'm still in transition. I'm getting my car worked on here in New York City, and I'm thinking of going back into the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights with an emergency submission there. And that I asked him what the business was, and I said, can I send him something by an email PDF? And he said no, he wanted to speak to me directly. And I said, okay, I can do that. And I said, until I can get my car fixed, I can't get up to Albany until Thursday and at 1 o'clock. And he said that would be fine. And I asked him where his address was, and he gave me the address, which is South Woods Boulevard in Suite 5 in Albany. So in anticipation of that meeting, I didn't get into any other detail other than he wanted to speak with me directly. He didn't want to discuss the content of the discussion other that he didn't want me to email the package. So he evidently had seen what's in the package, and I think that he may want to know what's on my mind. And that in anticipation of that, I certainly, knowing that Mitnick is a SES member, Senior Executive Service member, from the time that he served under Chertoff, who was the first Judge Chertoff, who went to the Southern District of New York, or either that he was U.S. Attorney. I think he was a judge at that point. And he went to become the first DHS member, or secretary, and that Mitnick served under him. So that Mitnick is a high-level person who is now in charge of DHS as the general counsel. But that, knowing that the problems with the SES, of course, all my antennas go up, and I intend to go to the meeting with unaccompanied. I will be taking a copy of my case against the Robert Druskin that I filed, who's the head of the DTCC and Seed and Company, and concerning Judge Oetken, who was the man who got rid of Glass-Steagall under Clinton, who was the judge assigned to that case. So and that's about 4 inches thick. So I'm taking him a 5-inch thick, the case that I did up in Syracuse, New York, against State of California, filed on December 15th of 2016, in which Robert Dornan and his wife Sally had done an affidavit and were included in an exhibit in that case that went before Judge Sanz, who, as soon as the Commission on Election Integrity was set up by executive order run by Vice President Pence, and that was set up on May 11th of 2017. And within 4 days, Judge Sanz, seeing that, essentially dismissed my case against California illegal voting in New York and California, shut that down without prejudice. In other words, if there's any evidence found by the commission, I can reopen that case. But nonetheless, it was dismissed. And that was on the 15th of May, 2017. So going into this 2018 election, knowing that that commission was sabotaged and it was shut down on January 3rd of 2018. Of course, there is no evidence now other than in 17 or so states they found 3 to 5 million illegals had participated and voted, but that they shut it down through legal action internal by the Democrats on the commission. In anticipation of further fraud and looking around and listening to American intelligence media and being familiar with Michael McKibben's work on electronic fraud, which broadened my understanding of fractional voting, which I had collaborated with Bev Harris on going into the 2016 case up in Syracuse. That's in there. And being familiar with vote fraud generally, and I filed this writ with the anticipation that there would be a middleman problems electronically, and that there would be the use of foreign meddling and interference, and the evidence that Michael just provided us on Monday substantiates that in a big way. So there's enough evidence that I'm going to show in those 3 cases to Special Agent Thomas Donahue on Thursday that I'm willing to share contacts with him and to beef that out. Now, if I'm going to ask him first, what's his background, and if he, I would expect that he was military, or I was military too, and so I have a military background. I'm going to show him my DD 214 and I got a commendation from the state, and I'll show him my resume. So I'll show him who I am personally. But I want to know what his education is. If in fact his education is psychology primarily, then I know that this thing is more than just a what's up and what can you do to help the president, but they want to find out if I'm growing a third head. But that's so I will ask that his supervisor be involved, and I'll ask that there be a recording. So based upon my just for the benefit of my of note, since I'm willing to do this under oath if necessary, that I want a recording of the sessions. Anyway, so I'm going to ask him that. I am always aware of contingencies and the problems that are involved in something like this, and I reached out to Tyler and Douglas so that there would be possibility if I would have them join in a conference call on Thursday to actually fill in some of the latest details and networks that I'm willing to provide, both in Field McConnell's networks who called me, and I'm waiting for a call from him right now. This is Wednesday at a little after 5. So I'm willing to share networks, and I'm showing him basically the proof, the sterling proof of the role of the senior executive service in sabotaging both the Treasury and the stock markets and the exchange stabilization funds. And I'm going to bring up the issue of offshore accounts. And I'm bringing along my friend Michael Shrimpton's book, Spy Hunter, that was published in 2012, 13. And that's already been sent to the White House with a cover letter with Nigel Farage. So, and that was reviewed by the U.S. Marshals. So those are the 4 things, and my presence there, he'll ask me what needs to be done, and if I have to reach out, I'll reach out to Michael and Douglas and Tyler and to a couple of other people, including Field. I know Field has been in touch with with the Trumps from the time of the QRS 11 through 14 autopilot problems in his aircraft and cars and helicopters, etc. That's been taken care of, and Field was involved with that. And I actually gave Trump a package of that along with Michael Shrimpton's intelligence on terrorism and sabotage. So with that said, sort of that's a record. I just wanted to give you and Tyler a heads up. Be ready, after 1 o'clock tomorrow.
I'm so glad that you decided to memorialize this, and that you decided to keep our followers up to date with what you're doing, because some are discouraged about the House being lost to the Democrats, but we were very positive today. We have a lot of hope about that, and so did Trump in his speech today. So what we're saying is there's still hope. And the fact that, let's just put it this way, they know you very well, Christopher, and they know that you are a formidable foe. And I'm sure you have gotten their attention many times. But have you ever gotten the attention of someone from the Secret Service that wants to meet you for the General Counsel of the Homeland Security Agency? I mean, isn't this kind of...
Never. I lived next to, in the 80s and the 90s, I lived next to Dora Bush's personal bodyguard, who was Secret Service, and because he spoke Spanish, he worked with Brooklyn North and do drug busts. He's now a CPA in Manhattan. So anyway, I'd set up a meeting on various intelligence regarding drug operations that I knew about in international drug networks, and I'd set up a meeting with him in particular. And the day that happened, the bomb went off by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and at the World Trade Center, blew the guy's car up. So that meeting was canceled. But Bob,
that does tend to cancel the meeting, yes.
Right, yeah. But that was tied up in the evidence that was also destroyed that was about to go to trial, and that was when so-and-so speaks, everyone listens. What's the name of that big finance house?
Merrill Lynch.
Were carrying Merrill Lynch, right? Merrill Lynch was about to go to trial. They were carrying duffel bags of money and in from the airport, having to do a drug sale. So all that evidence was destroyed the day that the first World Trade Center bombing occurred. Plus, blew up my friend. We were fellow motorcyclists. He got injured in motocross. He used to go out and actually damaged the government property, dislocated his shoulder, and he got in trouble. But nonetheless, I'm willing to give that name because he's one of my references of who I am, And but I've never officially, other than the Secret Service was willing to meet with my contacts back in 90. When was the first bombing? 92, 91. I've forgotten at this point. And time slips by. Yeah, I've never had any contact whatsoever, and I do have friends who are retired FBI who were very high up and who were forensic examiners who have proven, where the TARP funds went. I'm going to be discussing that too, and with the permission of the person before I would mention the name.
Well, I know you don't like to speculate, Christopher, but I love to speculate. So let me speculate here a little bit. Okay, you got Homeland Security. They're in charge of really what Trump just mentioned today as the report that will be given from the different agencies that were watching to see if there was election meddling or election rigging. And so there's going to be a report. So in the next 2 weeks, he said this is going to be coming out and he's going to be letting the public know about this. Was there meddling? Well, there was plenty of meddling. And what you have brought in the writ of mandamus demonstrates it to the nth degree. It's basically all the research and all the indictable evidence they would need to make a case against a number of people who were meddled in the election. So they know that you have that. So here you serve this to Homeland Security, exactly where it should be served. And then somehow you get a call from the chief counsel. Well, of course, that makes sense. It's a legal issue. But then they send the Secret Service to call you up and be willing to meet with you wherever you want to meet, really. So think about that. That pretty much leads straight to the White House, in my speculation, because the Secret Service, Who would Trump trust more than the person who is intimately aware of every element of his life? Who would he send to get information that he really probably didn't want others to really get a hold of, as well as it would be verbal, and there would not be a request of you to turn over a bunch of documents, but in fact to have a conversation? When does the United States government send a Secret Service agent to have a conversation? I think that's incredibly suspicious in a good way for us, because it indicates that perhaps this could go where we wanted it to go. We wanted it to at least get to Michael Pence, Vice President. But if this is what we imagine, what I imagine, and I speculate, and the conclave and Betsy also, we speculate that because it wasn't a U.S. Marshal, because it wasn't just some agent who was attached to the Homeland Security, or because it wasn't a lawyer attached to the Chief Counsel for Homeland Security, then why this? And why in this fashion? We don't know what it is, but we're definitely speculating that this may be what we hoped it would be, which was a flare that was shot up, that was indicating exactly what President Trump wanted. Show me the election rigging, and I will go after those people. Now, I know you're not going to endorse that because you don't speculate, but that's me speculating. And I just want to say thank you, because once again, you are putting yourself out there for the sake of all of us, for we the people, and your long history of doing this is truly amazing. It makes you a patriot that we should all be thankful for, and we get a lot of that from our followers as they make remarks when they hear what it is that you have to say. So I know you're not going to, speculate with me, but you have to be at least a little bit worried. You were worried about if this Secret Service agent was a psychologist or a psychiatrist, and that they were going to ask you maybe if perhaps you're crazy. What day of the week is it? Where are you? What state are you in? Sometimes I can't answer those myself, but we'd be worried about that because we don't want you to go through some kind of torture and persecution, psychological or otherwise. So we are hoping that this is actually a positive note. That's what we think. Now, I know you're not going to speculate, but what else can you tell us about how you feel about this meeting tomorrow?
Well, I don't want you to release this until after 1 o'clock.
Whatever you say. You're the boss, and this is
Right.
your life. This is your strategy, and your strategy has worked. You have the attention of the big dogs, so it worked.
After 1 o'clock. But what I'm going to raise as issues are the claims based upon the executive order done on the 12th of September that there be confiscation of these non-United States, non-hemispheric players who are the ones who are the middlemen manipulating the vote, whether they be in Belgium or Ireland or Sweden or wherever, or China. That I'm pushing the confiscation issue of assets, and that I'm pushing for the implementation and the rededication of the hemispheric right not to be interfered with by non-hemispheric players. None of those people that Michael listed in the report he did, what was it, yesterday or the day before, listed hemispheric players. Even Venezuela is tied up with Britain and others. But that the whole idea of the Monroe Doctrine was to keep the Europeans and non-hemispheric players out of this hemisphere, and so they wouldn't meddle. And I think that works very well and certainly the whole issue of the Iranians financing through Venezuela. I don't know why people call it caravan. It gives some sort of, I would call it the roving horde. And that that is, if anything, interference by the Iranians using the money that Obama gave the Iranians. They're using it as a weapon, people as a weapon. That's the Islamic principles that have been used for a long time. And I'm sure that even Turkey is involved. So I'm just saying that my discussion will be what I'm now outlining regarding the submission. I'm not going to fool around with the friggin' judiciary any longer. I think all the clerks are SES members. They've been there for almost as many as 20 years. So they have to be SES members. Only 6 clerks running. They're the ones running the Supreme Court. Hell, half the members, I would say, we know that Gorsuch, we know Roberts. We know that Thomas, when he was the EOAC, the Economic Opportunity, and Kavanaugh, they're all four of them SES members, so that there can be no justice, and there's a conflict of interest where they can't even hear this case. Now, when they denied, again, the clerks came after the third clerk. They said that I had to use Rule 20, not Rule 22-3, which I submitted 22-3, which basically states that when the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces is involved, that is directly related to the jurisdiction of the chief judge. So it went to him as direct jurisdiction. And I put in the two other cases that involved directly in the same subject matter. So when they came back, and essentially they did a legal opinion that the actual exhibits that were part of my writ were not of importance, which means there is no justice to be found in the court system, period. And that so I'm preparing for the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. I'm pushing heavily on this data because I know, and I can prove probably, that every one of the elections, including Brazil, was interfered with by the same out-of-hemisphere players. So I'm going in with that perspective of non-hemispheric interference. And I think that will play the right tune if there is a solo being played over at the White House. That would fit right into a narrative of sorts.
Absolutely, because Optech is used in almost all these countries. ES&S is throughout the world. The Strategic Communications Laboratory, they interfered in 44 different countries, 100 different elections. So yes, these are the same exact players, and what you are doing is to be highly commended, and we just want to say that we are very, very proud to be part of this, but we also want to send you the best energy we can, and we want to ask all of our subscribers and our followers who really do have a heart in this. It's a heart for the new republic, basically. We have to defend our republic in the Second American Revolution, but when we get it together, it may be the first in some people's opinion, but it can certainly be a new, shined-up republic based upon the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And that is what we saw also in the election yesterday. And so we have a lot of encouraging things that we got to see that came out of yesterday when Trump said, particularly in his press conference today, that we're all going to get a report on exactly who is responsible and guilty for election rigging and meddling in our election this time.